Greetings, it's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and today I want to talk to you about ethics. Now, what are ethics? Well, a lot of people define ethics as what you do when nobody's looking. Trying to do the right thing for the right reasons, in other words. And I like that definition. If we are doing the right things for the right reasons as it relates to the community or group or family or organization, then we're acting ethically. And when we go outside of what is expected in a negative way and people get hurt, that can be seen as being unethical. Well, where do we get ethics from? It's not something that you could buy from a grocery store. It's something that is learned over time, and it's usually learned by the leaders in our life, usually family members or someone we look up to, or bosses or leaders higher up in our organization. And it's something that leaders can model. Leaders must, at all costs, model absolute ethical behavior. Well, why? Well, people can get hurt. Sometimes organizations have to make business decisions and they lay people off because of bottom line issues. They want to put more money, and so they get leaner and meaner. And it's debatable whether or not they're being unethical when they lay people off, because that's always a risk. When you go and work for an organization, they can't necessarily guarantee you a job if they can't justify the means. And so that's just kind of one of the things that goes into a contract is, we'll employ you until you do something wrong or until we can't afford to. And that's an unfortunate situation when people get harmed because they trust that their employer is going to do the right thing and make good business decisions. And so you have to kind of wonder, are the leaders doing ethical things, and if they can't afford to keep people on. And most people want to do business with companies that act in an ethical way, and very often when companies don't act in an unethical way, people still continue to do business because their business model is good. And that's one of the things that tells employers that it's okay to be slightly unethical. I know that one of the world's most successful businesses and largest businesses in the world gets sued more often than the federal government because of poor business choices, overlooking hiring very qualified women to be in leadership positions and putting men in those positions because that's what they do. Unethical act. Get sued for being unethical. Locking your employees in a store so they don't steal from you while the manager's away. Highly unethical. So some things are clearly black and white, ethical and unethical. And then there are some things that to one person may seem unethical and to other people seem perfectly fine. And it's kind of interesting because, we're all different. And I guess that's kind of one of the lessons here is, how we see things, which affects what we do, which affects what we get. And if we think we are acting in an ethical way, generally speaking, and we're getting away with it, why would we want to change? But we have to, I guess that tells us that we have to look at the bigger picture. Are people being harmed by what we do? I guess a good litmus test to see, are we doing the right thing? If people are getting harmed, then maybe we're acting in an unethical way. And are we upsetting people? If we're upsetting people, maybe we need to take a step back and think, well, maybe I've given them reason to be upset, and because they're being harmed by something here. Am I thinking about more than me? Am I thinking about how other stakeholders are being impacted? Ethical behavior establishes trust, and trust is fragile. I was once given a gift from a friend, and it was a coffee cup. I love coffee, and I was walking, and somehow the coffee cup slipped out of my hand, and it broke into several different pieces. And so I picked up all the pieces and tried to glue the coffee cup back together. And that coffee cup, and no surprise, did not hold liquid. And so that coffee cup was never as strong as when I first dropped it. And that's how it is when you do something unethical, you break trust. And even though you may be able to find all the pieces and glue it back together, that trust is never as strong as it once was. And whenever you interact with other people, once you have broken that trust, they'll probably remember the unethical thing you did rather than all the good positive things that you did. And that's why leaders, especially at the top of the organization, need to make sure that they are acting absolutely ethically, because that's going to set the tone for the rest of the organization. People are going to be looking at the model that's being set by the top leaders. And every layer down in the organization, vice presidents are going to be looking at the president. President is going to be looking at CEOs. And vice presidents, directors are going to be looking at vice presidents, and so on. And if even one person is not acting in an ethical way, everybody down below probably is going to feel like they are working in an unsafe situation. When people are feeling like the situation that they're in has low trust, they've probably got one foot out the door. They're probably doing the bare minimum. They're probably not working at the highest levels of creativity. And they're probably working in silos and, protecting their own turf. And that's what happens when you have one leader acting unethically, is people don't feel safe in their situations, and so nobody below them can act. And so something's got to be done. And sometimes people don't even realize that how their behaviors are affecting the rest of the organization. So being ethical really matters. And sometimes because we don't think that we're acting unethically, we don't recognize the consequences. And sometimes maybe nobody is getting hurt and it's still seen as unethical. And so there's so many different dimensions that you can look at. One of my favorite things to talk about in ethics is here in the Seattle area, we have this really weird phenomena where we have people who sell coffee in little coffee stands, and they wear their bikinis. They're called bikini baristas. And some people are like, I can't believe that women would put themselves out that way. It's such an unethical way of doing business. But yet there are people who are like, what, are you kidding me? I like buying my coffee from someone that's wearing a bikini. And so, there's just two very strong sides of this. And one side, from a business perspective, is, well, that's simply just a business owner's way of distinguishing himself or herself from their competition. There's nothing wrong with that. They're not harming anybody. And then there's the other side of that is, I don't think that people should be dressed like that because it's not professional. Little kids could be walking by and seeing people like that. And so, and there are clearly two different sides of that. And there are people who are supporting that. I talked about, we support businesses that maybe treating their employees in unethical ways. But some people see no problem with that. So some things are not so cut and dry, ethical and not ethical. Laws are in place, usually based on what we deem to be ethical, like speed limit zones. Say Well, here's an example. Not too long ago, I was golfing with a friend that's a few years older than me, retirement age. And we were driving out in the countryside, and he was driving, and I was riding in the passenger seat. And I looked over at his speedometer, and he was going exactly 40 miles an hour. I'm like, this old grandpa, I cannot believe he is going exactly the speed limit. The speed limit sign that we just passed at 40 miles an hour, and he was going 40 miles an hour. And just when I had that thought that I can't believe this guy is just going so slow, something passed from the side of my eye, and I yelled, "Stop!" And the driver stopped. He said, "What?" And very seriously, I saw from the corner of my eye, and my heart told me to yell, "Stop!" A small child had kicked his ball out into the middle of the road, and if I had not yelled "Stop!" and if he had not been going 40 miles an hour, unfortunately, I think that child would have been hit by a car. And so, because he was acting ethically, driving within the expected means, a child didn't die that day. And I have a small child, and I've got two older daughters that I love very dearly. And if I lost any of my children, I would be totally desolated. And because my friend was driving ethically, according to the law, nobody died that day in my presence. And I am grateful. And it really makes me think about the fact that when we are doing the right thing for the right reasons, we're acting ethically, people aren't getting hurt, and we can live with peace in our lives. I grew up with around a lot of people who would say, "Oh yeah, as long as you're driving within 8 miles of the speed limit, you're not going to get a ticket." If my friend was driving even a mile faster, chances are that kid would have gotten hurt. So laws are put in place because they're of safety expectations, and safety is all about, helping make sure that people are not getting hurt. Figuring out where that line is between safety and making sure that there's a standard in place where people can still get to where they want to be within a reasonable amount of time. And so, as leaders, we need to make sure that we're modeling doing the right thing for the right reasons. We need to be able to make sure that if we want to have the maximum amount of stakeholders vested, we need to be doing things that they're seeing as being ethical. I love the Costco organization. Here's a company that takes ethics to the highest standard as far as I'm concerned. They want to make sure that their vendors get the best deal possible and they treat them ethically. They want to make sure that their customers are getting the best prices possible. And so they're having this ethical relationship with their customers. And then their employees too. They want to pay their employees, competitive rates and benefits to keep them coming back, which just makes such good sense. I mean, if you knew that the longer an employee works for you, the better skill that they have, the more they understand the systems that are in place, the stronger your organization can become. And so having ethics at the highest standard possible helps create win-win situations for everybody. So don't hurt people. Take a look at your actions and think about how you may be harming people by doing unethical things, and continue doing the right things for the right reasons. Anyway, I've talked on longer than I had intended, but relationships are fragile. We're always testing relationships with what we do, and we're being tested all the time. Making sure that you're doing the right thing, you have an understanding of what the right thing is with everybody involved, and then recognizing that we are our own brand managers. We can't afford to ruin trust by not doing the right thing for the right reasons. Anyway, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for your valuable time. I appreciate you watching. Have a great day. You get to choose how you feel about it. Signing off, this is Dr. Paul Gerhardt.